And the guest today is Ron Branstner, a guy who needs no introduction to folks here in Rochester. He's been in our area many, many times, and he's been on tour all around the region and really across the United States. He has some tremendous information to share with us this evening, so let's listen up. Mr. Ron Branstner, how are you today?
Doing good, Wes. Thanks again. I haven't talked to you for a while. It's good to see you.
Been too long.
It has.
There's so much
fight's still there.
Yeah, and we're trying as hard as we can to share this stuff out. And, the one good thing about COVID was that we learned how to go online and share information faster. We didn't have to all get together and try to get 100 or 200 people together in a room. Some of those crowds were fantastic, but this is a way that we can reach hundreds of people really, really quickly. And you've uncovered some amazing information, of course, with your research into Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030. What do you have in terms of an update for what we're in store for here in Minnesota? Even as we celebrate President Trump's victory, we still have a lot of work to do because we're under a big rock, aren't we?
We're under a huge rock. Don't think that the winning of President Trump is going to be your salvation or your Messiah, because that's not going to happen. Yeah, you got to think local. President Trump is a good avenue for the national scene in order to stop some of the funding that goes to many of these agencies that the progressive planners work with, and he could shut that faucet down with the trifecta of the Congress. But when it comes to what's going on locally, many of these networks have already been put into place. So we have to be very careful and be very diligent and don't let up the throttle on your local officials, because the networks have been put into place. And I'll get into that, how that works. But President Trump is not your Messiah. Work locally. You've got a lot to work with in the Rochester area because of the progressive, very, very leftist Mayor Kim Norton, who is pushing a lot of agendas. I believe she actually went to the United Nations World Summit here just recently. So she's got her hands pretty deeply involved. We got the Bloomberg deeply involved with Rochester. We have many, many radical organizations that have their footholds, and so let's keep putting the throttle down, because your local network is how it works. We're a bottom-up society, not a down society. We are bottom-up, so we have to worry about your city councils, your county commissioners. By the way, let me make this very, very clear. The most important position, I believe, in an elected position is the county commissioners. It's not the mayor. It's not your state legislators. It's your county commissioners. The reason why I say that is, after all the studying I've been doing, I find out that the county commissioners have more influence on your local communities than, let's say, the mayor does, because the 5 or 6 county commissioners, you only elect one of those per precinct. But 4 or 5 of those others are also having direct influence on your community. And we don't reach out to them, but they're the ones who vote whether they want regulations, whether they want zoning, whether they want your private property rights to be protected. There's 4 to 5 other county commissioners that are making decisions on your community that you have no idea that they have a strong influence on you. I believe that the county commissioner is the most important elected position in all elected positions when it comes to local government.
That's interesting, Ron. Do they also have, because I really don't know, but would the county commissioners have more contact with the regional economic development authorities as well for influencing policy?
That's absolutely correct. And that's why I said it's the most important. When you have these 6 different county commissioners, they all have different committees that they sit on. And many of them, probably all of them, go to 2 to 3 conventions a year. One of them's in Washington or Austin, Texas, or in Colorado. And when they go to these NACO conventions, NACO, small o conventions, they go there to lobby for money for your county. And they're bringing in and they're working with very, very lucrative foundations and government agencies to bring this grant money back to your community. And we don't know that they're doing it. So they'll go to, let's say, Washington, come back and say, we just received $50,000 to the YMCA. This is great news. And you're like, wow, these county commissioners are bringing in all this money. And in fact, they're lobbying with the United Nations or the United States and these lobbyist groups to attach UN Sustainable Development Goals to each one of those grants. Now, why I say that is back when Bill Clinton was in office, he created the U.S. Presidential Council of Sustainability, and he attached all grants that are coming back to the county and cities to have UN language attached to them. And so even though we say we want to get out of the UN, the United Nations, we're actually going deeper into the United Nations by allowing these county commissioners to take these grants with strings attached.
And the strings that are attached are not something we're informed of until after they've set something up that's in place. So they go ahead and roll out that initiative, like with a non-governmental organization or maybe with a nonprofit. And then the new enforcement of United Nations policies is in place. And we didn't vote for it. We were never asked. We were never informed of it.
Well, that's what you're 100% correct, but it even goes farther than that. When they create this private-public partnership between the grants, the legislators, and the commissioners, and the foundations, it's a private-public partnership. And then all of this money and grant money goes to the foundation to run a program. So I'll give you an example. In Minnesota, we signed on to the Soul Smart initiative. Soul Smart's an international organization, a 501c3, who then works with Great Plains Institute, which is a 501c3. They implement all of these solar energy fields into your area. Again, two nonprofit organizations who are getting money, who are also working with the county commissioners to be able to push these initiatives through with sustainability attached to it. When we go to say, hey, we don't want this in our backyard, what do the county commissioners say? It's a federal issue. We got the money from the federal government, and there is an agency, which is a nonprofit, Great Plains Institute, who is running the program. So basically, they're running the program, and we have no say. What the county commissioners are doing is they're creating another government outside the scope of government. So when you go to them, they say they gave it to somebody else. You go to that individual or group that is handling, and they say, well, it's the responsibility of the county commissioner. County commissioner says, well, that may be true, but we gave authority back to them. So right now we have no accountability. This happened in the refugee resettlement program also when the county commissioners went in and got involved with Luther Social Services and Catholic Charities. This happened with when it comes to solar energy. It's happening at every single level of government. The county commissioners are entering agreements with nonprofit organizations to run these programs, and then you have no accountability. And you can't follow the money.
Right. So they're non-governmental organizations. They receive tax-exempt status oftentimes, and they're operating outside the public's interest because the public isn't being informed or consulted in terms of the rollouts or initiatives that they bring out that are extra governmental. So it's highly suspect, and there needs to be a reckoning for that sort of thing, huh?
Well, it really does, and I want every single grant that is brought in by the county commissioners to be put out in the public so everybody can review what the grant says and the strings that are attached to it. I also want every grant that is taken to have no words of sustainability attached to it. Now, I brought this up to two different county commissioners in two different areas up in Otter Tail County and up in Stearns County, and they both said to me, if we don't take the money, we aren't able to fill our projects. We need this money whether it has it or not. So they're not willing to give away the to give up those grants just to have their project. Well, then, we've survived for 250 years with all of these projects. I think we could survive a little bit longer. But again, all grants must be exposed to the public, that there is no sustainability attached to it. And the county commissioners should sign a pledge that we will never take a grant that has UN sustainability language attached to it. When you do that, watch a fireball start. You want to create a fireball, a snowball, start bringing this up to your county commissioners, because they're going to be very angry because they know that they're getting their coffers filled by UN goals. You look at their comprehensive plan, it's all sustainability. They're planners, that create who are appointed positions by the county commissioners. Your planners have their comprehensive plan says they're attached to the UN sustainability goals. And also, whether you know this or not, the Rochester Planning Commission is part of the Planners Network, which is a national activist group of planners who believe in Marxism, who said that private property ownership must be eliminated. And we know that for a fact because it's on their website that they're involved. There's 900 planners in Minnesota, and they're overseen by the American Planners Association, who is then overseen by the Planners Network, who is a Marxist organization overseeing our planners. Plain and simple.
These ubiquitous planners are unelected individuals. They're appointed to these positions, aren't they? Like in the case of Rochester, I think the planners are appointed by we don't even really know who appoints these planners, but are these the people that will be making decisions behind the scenes, and there's no record being kept of the meetings and the decisions? There's another word for it, right? These sustainability planners, there's a ubiquitous term that keeps turning up all over the place, and they make decisions about everything from parks to roads and bicycle paths and so forth. And it all sounds very good, especially if you use the word sustainability. It sounds like a positive thing, but it really means the economic decline of the United States and the returning of America to the 1850s in terms of our economy.
Well, to answer it first, there was a couple questions that you had in there. And one of them was the planners commissions, and they should be televising, or at least you see it on YouTube, watch their planning commissions. They actually post those. So you can watch those on video. I was just recently at a planners meeting in Stearns County and addressed 3 5-megawatt farms. And when I started giving them information, to what I know, they asked me to leave the second time and said, we don't want to hear from you anymore, which they ended up apologizing to me later because they had no reason to do. They in return, they brought a cop in there to try to shut me up, and found out after it was all said and done. And when I walked out of the room, they then passed this 3 5-megawatt farms. And then when I called up, they said, yep, they had no right to do that. So the planners are well behind the backs of the county commissioners. They're working together in sequence with them. They're putting together these programs. You've got a really big network, and a lot of people say, well, I should go to the county commissioners meetings every 2 weeks and hear what they have to say. Well, you should actually go to the planners meetings, because the planners are the ones who are pushing it forward to get it to get the next step to the county commissioners. The county commissioners, by the way, are just a rubber stamp. They're a rubber stamp to non-elected people. That's the planners. The county commissioners do very little. You think they do a lot, they actually do very little. They create all these different boards: environmental boards, planning boards, library boards, airport boards. They create all of these boards, and when these boards get together, they bring these initiatives forward, and all the planners do is say yes or no. They just rubber stamp it. They have no idea the involvement in it. They never got involved. They just rubber stamp something, as long as it has sustainability attached to it.
Right. Okay.
You're running a government with no accountability. I asked them point blank, Show me accountability. That's all I'm looking for. Who's accountable for the region? Let's use, for example, let's use this one. Who's accountable for the regional library? Now, the regional library consists of 6 to 10 different cities that create one regional library. You probably have one down in Rochester, a regional library, or at least in that area. And they take one county commissioner of each county and they sit on the board along with a whole bunch of people that sit on these boards. And I said, well, if we have an issue with the county or the regional library, who do we go to? Do we go to you? Because they created a regional library board that was created by the county commissioner. So if I go to them, they're not an elected position. They don't have to answer to me. So if I have a question about pornography that's brought into the library, who do I go to? Because they won't answer me. They said, well, you come to us. I said, well, if I come to you, you got 6 to 12 different regions or cities that are on this board. Who do I go to? Well, you go to each one of these individually. So I would have to call up every single county commissioner, and in the end, they would tell me, well, we gave our authority to the library board.
Right.
You see how nobody ever takes accountability? And then, by the way, the library board, it gets their directives by the Minnesota Library Board. The Minnesota Library Board gets their directives by the American Library Association. The American Library Association gets their directions from the IFLA, the International Federation of Library Association. See how we went from local all the way to the international. And if you go into the International Foundation of Library Associations, it says right on their sites, and the American Library Association, we follow the United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainability Development Goals. You see, all these directives are coming from the United Nations, put down through these different entities, and when it finally lands at your lap, the accountability should be your county commissioner, but he gives it away to a nonprofit. That's no different with SolarSmart, and Great Plains Institute with solar. That's no different with the Library Association. That's no different in any entity. There is no accountability when it comes to the county commissioners. They're just a sitting body that gives their authority away to nonprofit organizations. They have no, there is no accountability. Ask me where the accountability is.
No, they've succeeded in turning us into a kind of European economic community where there's a lot of bureaucrats and the buck is passed and nobody really knows who's in charge, and they're nameless, faceless bureaucrats, and they're all unelected, and there's no accountability. And it's a further dissolution of the concept of jurisdictional authority. I think you're talking about Agenda 21 or 2030's interest in removing the concept of municipality, removing you hear all this talk about community, the community this, the community that, and it's a ubiquitous sort of terminology, but it's really indefinite and vague. So they don't want us thinking in terms of county lines or city lines and state lines. Instead, there's a overarching sense of we're just under control, but there's no accountability. So when I tried to find out from the Regional Athletic Association how much it cost for Bernie Sanders to use our regional athletic center for his political rally, and I tried to find out how much Bernie Sanders paid to have his political rally in our regional athletic center, nobody could answer the phone and answer the question of who had written the contract and how much Bernie Sanders had paid to use that. There was no answer forthcoming. There's simply no one seemed to be in charge. And I wrote emails and I made phone calls. And of course, at the end, I gave up. I remember a similar thing with the refugee resettlement program, when we were asking who's really in charge of having the quarterly meetings under the authority of the United Nations High Commission on Refugees. And nobody was willing to say that the meetings were even taking place. And I remember our mayor passed the buck to the federal level. And I asked a bunch of senators and our local representatives where and when the meetings were taking place. And Nobody seemed to know that they were even supposed to have meetings to consult with local individuals, because a lot of us had questions. But yeah, it's looking a lot like the European Economic Community.
Yeah, you brought up a good point. You're 100%. I actually went through that same issue with the refugee resettlement. Just recently, I asked for a data request from the city and the county. Believe it or not, I actually reached out to Olmsted County, your county, and I wanted a data request to all the information between LSS and the county. Every one of them said all that information has been scrubbed, meaning that we can only keep it for a certain period of time. So
They're
I
lying.
can't even go back and get it.
So they developed a policy that said they only held on to data for a certain amount of time, and then they would destroy all of the emails. So it was a concerted effort to distort the past, or just eliminate the past, the historical record of what it is they did. There's no shortage of space for them to hang on to these digital files, but they keep erasing. I think they keep it for 18 months or so, and then they just push a reset button. So every day that goes by, emails are deleted and the historical record is deleted, so that we can't go back and look to, again, who was responsible, who made the decision, who was in authority at the time, who said, this is what we're going to do. The records don't exist. It's truly bizarre. It's George Orwell would be impressed.
You really would be. I literally had to get some of the information from newspaper clippings in order to get what I wanted when it came to the refugee resettlement program. I actually had to reach out to Lutheran Social Services themselves, whether they would give me the information, and they actually did. And so I could not get a definitive answer from the county when the refugee resettlement program started in Stearns County. They said, we have no idea. That's as far, they were taking it to the point to where they had no concept of the county or the city where these international, by the way, refugee resettlement is an international policy. They had no concept of where it started, although they're still in the program, but they have no idea where it started and when. And so I literally had to go to the newspapers, find out, call Lutheran Social Services, because the county and city could not give me the information. You see, Wes, it all comes down to there is no accountability. The city and the county is giving all of their authority away to nonprofits and agencies and boards and appointed boards. You go to those boards, you ask them, I need help. They say, go back to your elected official. The elected official says, I can't help you because we gave the authority away back to the appointed boards, and neither one of them will take accountability. And so right now we're in this period of time where we have no accountability. Elected somebody, that really means nothing to me anymore. It absolutely means nothing. It really does, because it does when it comes to the county commissioners, because you could really stop them if you knew the program that they were running. I figured it out. I know how it works. I know how they're working. I know what agencies they're working with, which is NACO and NATO and all these different organizations nationally. But to try to express it and tell the community, they're just lost as soon as I open my mouth. They're just like, wow, this is too far above me. It really isn't. It isn't that far above you. You're one vote away from stopping this. All you have to do is vote. The process of voting hasn't stopped. We know what they're doing. You just need to say, okay, we're the experts. We know what I know what I'm talking about here.
Yeah,
Factually. And
actually, when we were talking about Mayor Norton coming back from the World Economic Forum and the WEF, and coming back with these accolades and a new position on the League of Cities, the National League of Cities. Are these organizations, I mean, we know that these are part of the United Nations plan as well to reduce the individual's responsibility. It puts her in a different level of management, in a different class, doesn't it? So
well, it really does. I don't understand how she is part of the the League of Cities unless she got appointed or elected onto the League of Cities. I mean, I've seen mayors that were on the League of Cities, and I see county commissioners. I can think of one mayor who was the vice president of the National League of Cities out of Wilmer, who was involved heavily with the United Nations and the Refugee Resettlement Program, who admits to it. He was on the National League of Cities and then becomes mayor. So, yeah, for her to be, I would like to see how she's involved with them, whether she's on a board and she's serving a quasi board of a League of Cities and the mayorship. That would be interesting, because then she would have a conflict of interest, because the city, the League of Cities is an insurance claim. There are two parts of the League of Cities. There's the insurance side, which protects the cities from any lawsuits, and then the other side is the diversity, equity, and inclusion side. There are two sides of it. So I would like to see what side of the fence she sits with the League of Cities if she's on a board, because that would mean that she has a conflict of interest as a mayor and the League of Cities when it comes to insurance questions. So we need to find that out.
So according to some sources, Kim Norton gets appointment from National League of Cities. Kim Norton will serve a 1-year term and will provide strategic direction and guidance for NLC's federal advocacy agenda and policy priorities. And another news source says that City of Rochester Mayor Kim Norton has been appointed chair of the National League of Cities, NLC 2025 Human Development Federal Advocacy. So now she sits on a federal commission with the National League of Cities.
Well, I find that interesting, because they're the same ones that protect you with insurance clauses for your city. So I'm not a lawyer. I'm not claiming to be a lawyer, but I feel there's some duality here going on here, where a city mayor of one of the largest cities in Minnesota, rural cities in Minnesota, and she's sitting on that board, which they make decisions on multiple different things, whether it be refugee resettlement, immigration, insurance clauses, sustainability, and she's got her hands directly in the very same thing that she votes for. She's also sitting on a board that implements these programs. So I would like to know more how she gets, why there isn't some conflict of interest with her sitting on that board. And then going to the national level or international level with the
right.
United Nations. And do you find this to be a little bit confusing?
She's been spending time with her German friends as well, occasionally with her German Green Party friends. Not so much the Green Party has fallen out of favor lately, but she's very much a representative tied in with European politics as well. And we've never been given an adequate explanation of how those relationships work and with which international politicians she's meeting with overseas, in support of the contract with the European Council of Europe that Mayor Brady had initiated. So we're coming up on 30 minutes, Ron. Would you want to do the last farewell for a minute or so and recap our discussion here so we can stay under 30 minutes?
Yeah. Rochester's in a serious dilemma right here, and the people of Rochester have no idea it's even happening, because it's all not elected people that are running their city. You mentioned the European Council. Mayor Brady got into that. We shared with you before why that was a conflict of interest. The idea that she's in an international, national League of Cities organizations. This is your mayor. We know that Bloomberg got his hands in the elections during the last 1 or 2 elections. Bloomberg out of New York, and so we're seeing just this constant redirecting of power to international and national and 501c3s that are running your city. This isn't a one man, one vote anymore in Rochester. You're losing your voice. You think you believe that you're doing something right because you believe in a cause. Well, the cause is you're giving up all your liberties because she's taking those away from you slowly and slower and slower by joining these leftist organizations, these international organizations. Just remember the articles of the Constitution says you must have one man, one vote. Article 4 of Section 4 says you must not have a government, a republic outside the scope of the republic. Well, she is creating a whole different democracy outside of the scope of the republic. You're losing your own voice, not because she's doing something right, it's because she's including all of these different organizations, non-profits, not elected people. And we're losing to the international councils, like you said, the International Council of Europe
well, Isaiah, Minnesota, that we need to talk about next time, Ron.
it
Isaiah,
is.
they ruled they presided over our elections in a really strong way. They got everything they wanted from tax increases this time around. Ironic that a tax exempt nonprofit charitable organization wants us all to increase our property taxes, and they won their referendums. They got their candidates that they endorsed elected, and it's all dark money. And we don't know what LLCs are supporting them, really. We don't know where the money's coming from. And they created 501c4s so that they could influence candidates and back candidates explicitly, because I had spent, like 3 years talking on the microphones about their 501c3s. And it was a little bit too obvious that they were supporting certain political candidates. They created a new group also called Faith in Minnesota, which is a strange sort of religion in itself, but it deals directly with endorsing candidates. But Ron, I'll let you have the last word again.
I wanted to make a clarification here for your audience. The difference between you have many different 501c3s. 501c3 is a nonprofit organization, not-for-profit, that works with to bring in their initiatives, whether it be even the Eagles Club, the Lions Club, just all these different organizations are doing good and some of them are doing nefarious things. A 501c4 that you mentioned is different than a 501c4. A 501c3, the 501c4 can lobby with the federal government, can sit at the table of the federal government and lobby with them. And the 501c4 can create a 501c3, so they can lobby for the 501c4, create a 501c3 and give that money to them, and then that's where your government becomes a quasi-government, because you got lobbyists sitting at the federal level on a 501c4 giving it to the very foundations that they create, and then they partner with the county commissioners, your elected officials, and that's when we come up with the United Nations Sustainable Development Program called private-public partnerships. And that's where we created a government outside of the scope of the republic. And that's what it is.
They don't want to use the word government anymore. They want to use the word governance. Governance, right?
Yeah, because 501c.
Governance. So they move away from the concept that government is this entity or this specific thing. So it's the same as removing jurisdictional lines of authority. So Mayor Norton is very fond of talking about governance, which is a different word from French that is like more of an attitude or a habit rather than a thing. So,
well, liberals are very good at changing the definitions of terminology. I mean, they're constantly saying, don't say assimilation, say integration. Don't say government, say governance. That's because all of this, you have to assimilate in the United States government. You have to integrate if you're working with the foundation. And that would be the same with what you just said. Don't say governance, because government would be the federal government or us, the people. Governance is a separate body that's governing over entities without any control. So that's very good. It's very good.
Without any responsibility and without any clear lines of authority. So it's just the governance is just, we're in control of this space, whereas government would imply that you have a chain of command and you have offices and you have people who are in authority, and those are the people who are responsible for the decisions. Governance is more amorphous. It's very clever, and it's charmingly well, I don't want to be seen as a misogynist, but it's a certain attitude, right? Of we're not going to be responsible for anything in terms of the decisions that she takes. She's into good governance. It's like best practices in medicine. Instead of actually doing science, it's just, well, we're going to do what we think is best. Well,
you're right.
not
You're
good
right.
enough.
I just have one last note I wanted to mention. You mentioned the word best practices. Now, I don't know if that's just something that slipped into your vernacular, but the counties and the cities use the word best practices instead of using the word Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. They replaced it because this is the terminology that they don't want you to know. So instead of saying SDGs, they say best practices. That's another way, and I don't know if that was a subliminal message or if that was just, but that was just like exactly what they're doing. Watch the word best practices be used, because if you use that, they're using United Nations language.
And then they can't be held accountable for having actually achieved or not achieved a specific criteria, a marker for success or failure. So they're really doing away with responsibility and accountability, as you said before.
No
Well,
accountability. No accountability. That, you know, what you take away anything we just said tonight. Take away one thing. Every time you ask a politician, and I use politicians because they're not servants anymore, ask them who's accountable. I just want to know. If I come to you and I want to know about this issue, whether it be the libraries or solar, who's accountable? If they said us, then say, why aren't you at the meetings? Why aren't you there? Show me accountability. I want to see accountability, because if you have no accountability, then this is now the modern day Boston Tea Party. Because remember, the Boston Tea Party was throwing the tea over the side of the ship because they had no accountability of taxation without representation. You must have representation in everything you do. If I have a library board, I need representation. You can't give it to somebody else. If I have a solar, I need representation. Who's going to represent me when that cell phone or cell tower, solar tower goes onto my property on eminent domain? Who represents me? Don't tell me that a not elected, soul smart Great Plains Institute is running the program. You will represent me because you're my elected body. And if they said we don't, we gave it away several years ago, then we just lost our government. And that's just happened to me, by the way.
That's happening a lot, and we're seeing it more and more. And Ron, we haven't talked in at least 10 months, and I think we need to talk a lot more. And I hope we have another conversation specifically about Isaiah, Minnesota, and then maybe a third conversation about the League of Women's Voters. Let's try to make an effort to get together sooner than later, Ron. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You got it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Talk to you again. Bye-bye.